Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you my lesson planning process that I went through in order to put together our 6-week main lesson block for ancient Roman history. So you can see some of the materials that I have here, but the first thing I usually do is start with my live education main lesson book, and I use that as a guide in order to put together our main lesson blocks. So you can see that I have a lot of resources here, and you can see the finished lesson plans, which are available free for downloading on my website at pepperandpine.com. You can find that link down in the description box below. Alright, so I have my Ancient Roman History main lesson book from Live Education. I really like this as a resource for parents and teachers. It comes with a lot of information, but it also leaves a lot of room for you to add your own resources. And some of the resources are suggested in this main lesson book, which we have, but we also kind of got enthusiastic and got a whole lot more. Now, the main lesson book suggests that this main lesson block should be about 7 weeks. And initially, I was going to do it about 7, maybe even 8 weeks. But we decided to make it 6 weeks once we started sorting through all of our materials. So I took all of the resources that we had and I laid them out on the carpet in our homeschool room. And you can see that we have quite a few. Now, I also have my computer ready to go, and I'm going to show you how I actually put together my lesson plans using a really simple program on my computer. But also, don't forget that these lesson plans are available at Homeschool Panda, so that you can easily use them and modify them to suit your own homeschool needs. So I'm just sorting these in different piles. I've got some activity books there, got some resource guides here. Anytime I find a few books that are basically on the same topic area, I'll put them together, and then I can either do one activity book per week or I can spread it out over a couple of weeks. Now, if they are books on the same topic area, like a couple of books on Pompeii or books on Roman times or Roman gladiators, I will put those together and I will have little mini themes within this 6-week unit. A book like this, Food and Cooking, that's going to last an entire week because we also want to cook recipes from that book, so we'll need a lot of time to do that one. I've grouped together all the books that I'm going to be assigning to my 11-year-old son to read. Some of them are really easy and he could read them in a day, and others are going to take him longer to read, so I still have to figure out where I'm going to put those into the lesson plan. At this point, I have all 6 weeks divided up so that they include some of the assigned reading for my son, as well as the books that I'm going to read aloud and any activity books that we're going to do. So now it's time to head to the computer. I am using Numbers on my Mac, and I opened up the menu template. I'm going to clear what's in it already, including the top row here, which had like snack and lunch, and I'm just going to change that out for Monday through Friday. And then on the left side, where it has Monday through Sunday, I'm going to clear that out as well. For my title, I'm just going to add lesson plan for week 1, and I went ahead and I added the date, but you could also leave this without the date. That way it could be a more flexible lesson plan. And then I just changed this to week 1, but I didn't like the color, so I went in to change the color, and I messed up, so I had to do it again. And this is obviously optional. I just wanted to do that. And then you can see that it has other templates in here. And so I changed out like the shopping list to be my book list. And then that way I could list all the books that we're using. And then instead of the different sections that they had here, I changed it to name and author. And I'm going to come back in and put page number in there. At this point, I'm just doing like a rough outline of what I think is going to work. There's going to be a lot of changes, and I'm going to leave the whole process in here for you so that you can really see start to finish how this comes together. So at this point, I need to add a row above where I had my live education curriculum assignment. And that's just because I wanted my opening activities and the daily math, and if I had daily grammar, to go at the top of the lesson plan, with our hands-on activities going at the bottom of our lesson plan, so that our lesson plan sort of mirrors what the day is going to look like. And then at the very bottom, I have outings and appointments. All right, so I'm back in that book list tab there, and I just altered it a little bit because I wasn't quite sure how many books I wanted to put in here, whether it was all the books or just the historical fiction. At this point, it's going to be all the reading books that I have assigned to my 11-year-old son. And this is where it's a little bit different this time around. My son is just an avid reader and reads a lot, and I have assigned a lot of books for him, so I don't recommend assigning this many assigned books for your student just because I think he's going to end up reading probably 20 or 25 books by the time this is done. A lot of them are really easy and took him less than a day. All right, so we're back in the lesson plan here, and if you've noticed, I've left some things kind of blank. I've put in what I want to do, like lesson 1 through 5, but I've also left a line there so that I can fill that in after the fact. This allows me to do my whole 6 weeks without knowing exactly the day-to-day for all the assignments. Some things I'll know, like all the books that I want assigned to my son, and the basic theme for each week, but the actual lessons for what we're going to put in our main lesson book, that I'm not quite sure about because there's a little bit of flexibility in that. And I didn't want to plan all 6 weeks in one go. All right, so I am back to my lesson plan template, and you can see that it's all on one file. And every time I need a new week for my lesson plan, I'll just duplicate it and then I can come back in and I can change it. You can see that we're up to week 3. I'm just changing the date. Now, a lot of things are basically going to stay the same. On the left column, you can see basically all of the headers for these different assignments that we're going to do. But on the body of the lesson plan, that's where the changes are going to be. So I'm changing out the lessons for our live education curriculum. I also previously changed out the key to percents page numbers, and now I'm working on the rest of it by adding the chapters that we're going to read for the books that I've assigned for myself to read aloud, as well as the book titles that my son is going to read. Now, I'm showing you the entire process, so this is actually not what it's going to look like at the end because this lesson planning process actually occurred over the course of 1 week, which was the beginning week of this unit. And immediately we already realized that some changes needed to be made to the lesson plan. So we already made some changes, which I will show you, but at the same time, I also want to remind you that changes will undoubtedly be made throughout this whole 6-week unit. So the lesson plan should really be a guide, but you should also bear in mind that changes can and will be made, and to allow yourself to be able to make those. And by adding in some blank spaces, sometimes it's a little bit easier to go back in and make those changes without feeling really locked in and obligated to your lesson plan. All right, so I am changing up my son's daily math. He's moving into a new book, so it's Key to Geometry, book number 1. And I'm assigning 1 to 2 pages for each day, but that may change depending on how difficult those pages are. He may be able to do more, or he might have to do less. All right, so for my live education curriculum, I'm going in and I'm adding in the new lessons there, but keeping that line blank so that we can add in what those lesson titles are after the fact. And for the story of the Romans, that's going to get changed. You can still see that it's just 1 chapter a day, but those chapters are extremely short, and we're going to be changing that. I also have my assigned reading, which is pretty straightforward from my son. The additional reading, which was in the tab above it, or rather the row above it, that was a little bit harder to decide how to choose that assigned reading that I was going to do, which is basically me reading aloud to my son from additional resources. It just depends on how much time we're going to have to see if I have enough time to read some of those additional books aloud to my son. Sometimes, even though I have written them into the lesson plan for me to read aloud to my son, he ends up reading them on his own. So I'm just filling in some more books in the historical fiction book list column, which is going to be changed just to a general book list because towards the end of the lesson plans, I'm noticing that the books that I'm assigning to my son are actually not historical fiction, but they're just straight up historical books. And so instead of doing a new book list, I decided just to keep them all on one book list. And this basically is just the books that I'm assigning to my son. That way it's just super easy and a lot of fun to check them off. However, I mostly just check them off on the lesson plan that we print off, then I'll just put a little check mark next to it. So here I am changing the title just to historical fiction and nonfiction, and then you can change the dimension of the box, but I'm still kind of new to this program, and so it took me a little while to figure out how to do that, but I figured it out. Okay, so at this point, there's going to be some changes. So I take out this whole row where I have the Charles Kovacs book that I'm reading 1 chapter a day. I completely leave that blank for about 3 weeks. Instead, since I realized that the book that we're reading, the story of the Romans, we were reading so many chapters of that we practically got done with the entire 6 weeks within 1 week. And so what I decided to do was just to alter that in the entire lesson plan for the 6 weeks and do 4 chapters a day for that book, since the chapters were really short, really engaging, and super fast to read. And I've left the other, basically a history resource book, the one called Ancient Rome by Charles Kovacs. I've left that one blank, and I'm going to revisit that middle of our unit and then put aside the history of the Romans, or rather the story of the Romans, and read the other books so that I'm not reading them simultaneously, because that can get a little bit confusing. So instead, I've put in 2 chapters a day for the Charles Kovacs book for just 2 weeks in the middle of this unit. And I've done 4 chapters a day for the story of the Romans. And these are the kind of changes that I'm talking about that can occur either right before a unit starts or after the unit has already started. Now, since I hadn't printed these out, I was able to make the changes before I printed these lesson plans out. So let's take a look at the 6 weeks of lesson plans. You can see that there are some blank spaces that I have already started to fill in as this week has progressed. And I know now, like say, for instance, the mental math and the games that we're doing, as well as the lessons for our live education curriculum. Now, if you check back after this unit is complete, I will have gone back in and made those changes so that you can see a more complete, more realistic lesson plan for the things that we actually did during those weeks. So the updated lesson plans will be available when I do my review of this unit, and then you'll be able to find those updated lesson plans on my website. All right, so a couple of notes about doing a lesson plan this way. I like seeing my entire week at a glance. It makes it really easy for me to see what we're supposed to be doing. You can notice that there aren't any time slots in this lesson plan. We don't really homeschool according to the clock, but we do have a particular rhythm during the day. And so some of the things that we like to start out our day with are the mental math games and the games, as well as any of the other opening activities that I have scheduled. Having some independent work for my son also makes it a lot easier for me to be able to collect myself for the day and maybe even do something with my younger daughter while he's doing, like, for instance, his daily math, which are the percent books and then the geometry books, as well as any of his independent reading. And because of the cycle of our lessons, he'll have some writing to do every day, which usually follows after I've presented the new material for the new lesson. So in general, we may do the new lesson on one day, but the writing for that lesson comes the following day, which allows him to have some independent work right at the start of the day when he seems more inspired to do the writing versus later in the day, because I've noticed that our main lessons, the new content to our main lessons, tends to come later on in the day. Paying attention to our natural rhythm has allowed me to figure out the best way to do our lessons by putting in some of the more independent work first thing in the morning and just accepting that the new content for our main lesson block is going to come later on in the afternoon, which seems to be okay since that allows my son to do a lot more independent work first thing in the morning. Now, since we have done this unit before, I have a playlist with all of the activities and projects we have done. I will be adding the new projects and activities to that same playlist, and if you want to check it out, you can tap on the screen right now. I've left a couple other playlists that might interest you, and don't forget that if you want to check out what we're doing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.